The last words my husband said to me on our wedding night were, "You were always the practice wife." He said them while he was still buttoning his shirt. While my maid of honor, my best friend since we were 11 years old, was crying in the bathroom of the suite I had picked out for our first night as a married couple. He said them like he was reading the weather. 7 years later, I sat at the head of a mahogany table in a 38th floor boardroom in Chicago, and I watched him walk into the room, take one look at me, and lose the color in his face like someone had unplugged him. He didn't know I owned the company yet. He was about to find out. My name is Patricia. This is the story of how a girl who slept in her car for 4 months became the woman who signed the man who destroyed her into a contract he could never escape. And how I learned, quietly, slowly, over 7 very long years, that the best revenge is not what you do to the person who broke you. It's who you become afterward. Let me take you back. I was 26 years old, and I genuinely believed I had won the lottery. Marcus was 28, tall, charming in the specific way that men are charming when they have been trained from boyhood to be charming. He worked in operations at a mid-sized logistics company. He came from a family that had a pool. He told me on our 3rd date that he had been waiting for someone like me his whole life. Someone real. I should pause here, because if you have ever loved a man who told you that you were different from the other girls, you already know how this story ends. Stevie had been my best friend since middle school. She was the kind of friend who showed up at your apartment at 1 a.m. with ice cream when your dog died. She was loud, magnetic, the center of every room she walked into. I was the quiet one, the careful one. We balanced. When Marcus proposed, Stevie threw me a bridal shower so beautiful I cried for an hour afterward. She helped me pick out the dress. She wrote a maid of honor speech that made my mother weep. She was, by every measurable standard, the best friend a woman could ask for. The wedding was small, 80 people in a converted barn in Vermont, the kind of wedding you Pinterest for 2 years. I remember dancing with my father. I remember Marcus's hand on my back during our first dance, and the way the light from the string bulbs caught in Stevie's hair while she watched us from the side of the room. I remember thinking, I am so lucky. I went up to the bridal suite first. I had a headache from the champagne, and I wanted to take off my shoes before the after party. Marcus said he'd be up in 5 minutes. When he wasn't up in 20, I went looking for him. I don't need to describe what I found. You already know. Every one of you watching this, you already know. What I will tell you is this. When I opened that door, Marcus did not jump. He did not panic. He did not even apologize. He looked at me, sitting up against the headboard of the bed I'd chosen for our first night as husband and wife, and he said, quietly, almost gently, "I was going to tell you next month." Next month. He had a timeline. Stevie was crying. Marcus wasn't. Marcus was annoyed, the way you are annoyed when the delivery driver gets your order wrong. He sighed. He sat on the edge of the bed, and then he said the sentence that has lived in my chest for 7 years. "Patricia, come on. You were always the practice wife. You knew that." I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry, not yet. I just stood there in my wedding dress, in the doorway of a room I had paid for, looking at the 2 people I had loved most in the world. And then I turned around, walked out, walked down the stairs, walked past my parents and my aunt, and the 80 people who had come to celebrate the happiest day of my life. And I walked out into the parking lot in my wedding dress, and I sat down on the curb. That's where my father found me. That is where my old life ended. Pause the story for a moment. I want to teach you something, because if I don't, none of the rest of this makes sense. What Marcus did to Patricia that night is not unusual. It feels unusual because it is so cruel, but the pattern is textbook. It's called the Idealize-Devalue-Discard cycle, and it is the operating manual of the covert narcissist. In the idealize phase, you are placed on a pedestal. You are unlike anyone he has ever met. You are real. A word covert narcissists use a great deal because it implies that other people are fake and that he has finally found someone worthy. You feel chosen. That feeling is the hook. In the devalue phase, which begins quietly, sometimes years in, small things start to slip. He criticizes your laugh. He rolls his eyes when you talk to his friends. He starts withholding affection and then giving it back in inconsistent doses. which is a phenomenon called intermittent reinforcement, and it is, neurologically, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You will work harder for unpredictable affection than you will for consistent affection. This is not a flaw in you. It is how human brains are wired. And then comes the discard. The discard is rarely a fight. It is rarely emotional from his side. It is a transaction. You have served your purpose, and now he is moving to the next supply. The reason Marcus could call Patricia the practice wife with no emotion in his voice is that in his mind, that is exactly what she was. There was no contradiction for him. There was no betrayal. To a covert narcissist, other people are not characters in their life. They are props. Now, here is what they don't expect. They do not expect the prop to walk off the stage and build her own theater. I was not okay. I want to say that. Because there is a version of these stories where the wronged woman gets up off the curb and immediately becomes a CEO. And I don't want to lie to you. That is not what happened. The marriage was annulled within 6 weeks. Marcus didn't fight it. He had already moved Stevie into our apartment by the time the paperwork was signed. Stevie's father owned the marketing firm where I had worked for 4 years. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was called into a meeting and told that the optics of my continued employment were difficult and that I should consider a transition. I was offered 3 months of severance to disappear quietly. I disappeared quietly. My lease was in Marcus's name. I had no apartment. My savings, every dollar I had gone into the down payment on a house that closed in his name, alone, the week after the wedding. I moved in with my parents for 6 weeks, and then my mother, who I love, who I will love until the day I die, sat me down at her kitchen table and said, "Honey, you have to stop crying. People are talking." So I left. I had $73 in my checking account. I had a 2009 Honda Civic with a check engine light. I had a duffel bag of clothes and a box of books and the wedding dress, which I could not bring myself to throw away. I drove west. I am not going to romanticize the 4 months I lived out of that car. There is nothing romantic about washing your hair in a gas station bathroom. There is nothing inspiring about eating cold beans out of a can in the parking lot of a Walmart at 2 in the morning because you are too ashamed to go inside and be seen. I lost 14 pounds. I lost a molar I couldn't afford to fix. I lost the part of myself that believed the world was a fair place. But I want to tell you about the night I changed. I was in a truck stop diner outside of Amarillo. I had ordered a coffee because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and I needed somewhere warm to sit. There was a woman 2 booths down, maybe 65, sharp suit, reading the Financial Times. She kept looking at me. I assumed she was going to ask me to leave. Instead, she walked over, set a $20 bill on my table, and said, "Order food, and then come sit with me." Her name was Margaret. She was in town consulting for an oil company. She asked me what I was running from. I told her. She listened for 45 minutes without saying a word, and then she said, "Patricia, listen to me carefully. The man who told you that you were the practice wife was telling you the truth, but not in the way he meant it. He was practicing. He is a small man, and he was practicing being a husband on a woman he did not deserve because he didn't have the imagination to want anything bigger. You, on the other hand, were never practicing. You were preparing." "For what?" I asked. She slid a business card across the table. "Come to Chicago. I will tell you for what." I went to Chicago. Margaret was the founder of a small private equity firm. 8 employees, very quiet, very wealthy. She hired me as an executive assistant. I made $42,000 a year. I slept on a pull-out couch in a 1-bedroom apartment I shared with 2 other women, both nurses, both kind. The first year I did nothing but watch. I watched how Margaret read a room. I watched how she negotiated. I watched her in meetings with men who tried to talk over her. And I watched the precise, surgical way she let them finish before she destroyed their position with a single sentence. I learned that power, real power, never raises its voice. I enrolled in night classes for my MBA. I worked from 7 in the morning until 10 at night. I did not date. I did not drink. I did not, for almost 2 full years, see a single person socially who was not connected to my work. I want to be honest with you about something. This is the part of the story that the internet always skips. Becoming the woman who could not be hurt by Marcus again was not a glow-up. It was an amputation. I cut away every part of myself that had ever been soft, every part that had ever trusted easily. I rebuilt myself out of work and discipline and a kind of cold, clean rage that I learned, eventually, to convert into fuel. I do not recommend the way I did it. I recommend therapy. I recommend slowness. I recommend the long, gentle path I did not take because I was 26 years old and on fire, and I did not know any other way. But I will tell you what it built. By year 3, I was an associate. By year 4, I was a vice president. By year 5, I had led my first acquisition, a $60 million deal that earned the firm an 8-figure return. Margaret promoted me to partner on my 31st birthday. She gave me a Mont Blanc pen and a bottle of Sancerre and said, "Now we hunt." By year 6, I was chief operating officer. By year 7, I was the youngest woman ever named to Crane's 40 Under 40 in our market. I bought my mother a house in Sarasota. I bought myself a glass apartment on the 32nd floor of a building overlooking Lake Michigan. And then, in March of my 7th year, a deal landed on my desk that I almost passed on. A mid-cap logistics company in Indianapolis. Underperforming, bloated middle management, a board that wanted out. I almost passed on it. The margins were thin. The integration would be ugly. And then I saw the org chart. There, listed as Senior Vice President of Operations, was a name I had not let myself say out loud in 7 years. Marcus Hackshaw. I need to stop the story again, because what happens next requires you to understand something about success and revenge. There is a phrase you have heard 1,000 times. Success is the best revenge. It's a beautiful sentence. It is also, in the form most people use it, completely wrong. Success, by itself, is not revenge. A narcissist who broke you and moved on is not by default sitting somewhere reading your LinkedIn updates and weeping. They have replaced you. They are busy. They have a new prop, and the new prop is currently in the idealize phase, and they are not thinking about you at all. What makes success a form of revenge is proximity. It is the moment the narcissist is forced by circumstance, by chance, by an org chart on a Tuesday morning, to look directly at the woman he discarded and see, in unmistakable terms, that he made a mistake of historic proportions. That moment is not the goal. That moment is the byproduct. The goal, the real goal, the only goal that heals, is the 7 years before that moment. The years in which you build a life so complete, so independent, so genuinely your own, that when the moment finally comes, you are not even hungry for it. You are just curious. Patricia, at this point in the story, was no longer hungry. She had healed. She had a partner, a quiet, kind cardiothoracic surgeon named David, whom she had met at a charity event 2 years earlier and dated for 18 months before she let him meet her parents. She had a life. But curiosity is its own kind of force, and she was very, very curious about what would happen if she walked into a boardroom in Indianapolis and let Marcus Hackshaw see her face. The acquisition closed on a Friday. We bought the company for 12% below market value, because the internal dysfunction was worse than the books showed, and a significant portion of that dysfunction, I learned during due diligence, traced back to a single SVP who had spent 4 years protecting his own territory at the expense of every department around him. You can guess who. The all-hands meeting to announce the change in ownership was held on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. in the company's main boardroom on the 38th floor. I flew in the night before. I stayed at the Conrad. I slept 8 hours. I did not, contrary to what every movie about this scenario would suggest, lie awake rehearsing what I would say. I had nothing to say. I was there to do a job. I wore a charcoal suit, no jewelry except the small diamond stud earrings David had given me for my last birthday. My hair was pulled back. I carried a leather portfolio that contained the org chart I would be revising before lunch. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat at the head of the table. The executive team filtered in. They did not know me. They had been told that the new owners would be present, but they had been given no names. This was deliberate. Marcus was the 7th person through the door. He was 45 pounds heavier than the last time I had seen him. His hairline had retreated. He was wearing a wedding ring, though I knew from the public records that Stevie had divorced him 3 years earlier. I don't know why he still wore it. I suspect it was easier than answering questions. He walked in mid-sentence, laughing at something the man next to him had said. And then he saw me. I want to describe his face to you because it was the only revenge that ever mattered. It was not shock. Shock is too loud a word. It was a slow, dawning recognition, the kind of recognition that happens when the brain is presented with information so impossible that it has to be processed in stages. First, his expression said, "That woman looks familiar." Then it said, "That woman looks like Patricia." Then that is not possible. And then finally, like a building collapsing inward, his face did the thing I had imagined 1,000 times in the truck stop diner in Amarillo, and on the pull-out couch in Chicago, and on every 14-hour day for 7 years. His face understood. He stopped walking. He stood, very still, in the middle of the boardroom. The man next to him asked if he was okay. He didn't answer. I did not smile. I did not stand. I did not gloat. I gestured, with the calm professionalism that Margaret had spent a decade beating into me, to the open seat at the far end of the table. "Mr. Hackshaw," I said, "please, sit. We have a great deal to discuss." He sat. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. I introduced myself. I outlined the new ownership strategic priorities. I explained the timeline for the restructuring review. I answered questions. I was, by every measurable standard, professional, gracious, and clear. Marcus did not speak once. At the end of the meeting, as the room emptied, he tried to approach me. I turned to my second-in-command, a woman named Pamela, brilliant, 6'1", formerly Marine Corps, and I said, "Please escort Mr. Hackshaw to his office. He looks unwell." Pamela took his elbow. She did it gently, the way you escort an elderly relative. He did not look back. He emailed me that night, 3 pages. Long, confessional. "I have thought about you every day for 7 years. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I have been waiting for a chance to apologize. Stevie ruined me. I was not myself. I have grown so much. I need you to understand." I did not read past the first paragraph. I forwarded the email to my general counsel with a note that read, "Please draft a response confirming that all communication between Mr. Hackshaw and the new ownership should proceed through HR. Thank you." She drafted it. I signed it. I went home. Stevie found my address, I still don't know how, and sent a handwritten letter 2 weeks later. It was 9 pages. It said, in summary, that she had been young, that she had been confused, that she had loved Marcus and lost him too, that she had cancer in remission, that she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her, that she would understand if I could not, that she had wanted to reach out for years. I read all of it. I sat with it for 1 full evening. I cried a little. Not from anger, but from a sad, clean grief for the 11-year-old girls we had been once. The ones who made friendship bracelets at summer camp and swore on a stack of Sweet Valley High books that we would be each other's maid of honor someday. And then I put the letter in a drawer. And I did not respond. Not because I had not forgiven her. I had, in the long, slow way that forgiveness actually works, which has nothing to do with the other person, but because forgiveness and access are not the same thing. And she had not earned access. She would not earn access. That, I think, was the moment I finally healed. The moment I understood that I could wish her well and never speak to her again, and that those two things were not in contradiction. Marcus was let go 6 months later as part of the restructuring. The decision was not mine. I had recused myself from all personnel decisions involving him, and the recommendation came up through HR independently. His performance reviews were poor. The decision was unanimous. I heard through a colleague that he moved back to his mother's house in Ohio. I do not know what he is doing now. I have not looked. That, I think, is the real measure of whether you have healed. Not whether the person who broke you is suffering. Not whether they are sorry. Not whether they have apologized. It is whether you can go an entire year without checking. Patricia is 40 years old now. She is the CEO of a $400 million fund. She is married to David. They have a daughter named after Margaret, who passed away 2 years ago and left Patricia her firm. They saw Marcus once more, at a charity gala in Chicago 18 months ago. He was working, bartending the event in a black vest, pouring champagne. He recognized her. He froze, holding the bottle. Patricia walked up to the bar. She ordered 2 glasses of Sancerre. She tipped him $40. She said, "Thank you," and she walked away. That's the story. I want to leave you with one thought, and then I want to hear from you. There is a version of this video, the version most of the internet would tell, in which the lesson is, get even. The lesson is, Become so successful that the person who broke you has to watch. That is not the lesson. The lesson is that Marcus was always going to fail. He was failing the day he met Patricia. He was failing the day he married her. He was failing on the wedding night when he said the cruelest thing he could think of, because cruelty was the only power he had ever learned to access. He has been failing his entire life, and he will continue to fail, and Patricia's 7 years of work did not make that happen. It only made her present to witness it. The work was never about him. The work was about her. The glow-up is not the revenge. The glow-up is the goodbye. If this story moved you, if you have ever sat on a curb in a wedding dress, or in a parking lot, or in the bathroom of a house that no longer felt like home, and wondered if you would ever be okay, I want you to know 2 things. 1, you will be okay. Not next month, not next year, but eventually, and more completely than you can imagine right now. 2, the person who hurt you is not the protagonist of your story. They never were. They were a chapter. You are the book. Tell me in the comments. What is one thing you have built, since the worst thing happened to you, that you are quietly proud of? It doesn't have to be a company. It can be a habit, a boundary, a morning routine, something small, something yours. I'll be reading. I'm Thora. Subscribe, like, comment, and share, and I'll see you in the next one.